It's another fine day at Camp Dynasty. I am Counselor Austin, joined by Counselor Collin, and we have reached the end of our Rankings 2.0 series. Somehow 5 weeks worth of ranking the 2024 rookie class, Collin. It's been a journey, and we're going to end it today with 3 position groups because this is the IDP episode.
Yeah, the rankings episode, they came and went. It's crazy that we've made it to the end of them, and I'm very excited about this IDP class. Some news that has happened over the last week pertaining to this 2024 class is Travion going back to school. And then the 2025 class is also Quinshon Judkins is transferring to Ohio State, so they're sharing a backfield next year. So 2025 class has those 2 guys in it, both at Ohio State. Also, Emeka Egbuka is going back to Ohio State, which affects this 2024 class. So a lot of stuff, a lot of news, just quick thoughts.
It's been a busy week.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of crazy. Since the last time we talked, all of that has happened. We have a national champion in college football.
Right.
And we get the Wolverine declaring, like, JJ McCarthy's in, look out. And
Blake Corum
is in.
Donovan Edwards back to school.
Which I love that. Yep. Donovan Edwards going back. Travion going back, I don't understand it at all.
I don't get it.
My belief is that NIL is going to radically change running backs in terms of the draft, because we already saw a top name like Blake Corum do this last year. Come back to school, why would you do that? Well, Travion deciding to do that while arguably the best running back in the country is coming to town to, share a backfield with him. So I'm not entirely sure what the rationale was from his side. Maybe there is an emotional side of this that we cannot comprehend, but I feel like it's just a money thing, and it's kind of smart when you think about what's happening with running back in the NFL. So I hope it works out for Travion. 2025 running back class looking pretty damn good.
Yeah. It's going to not be like this year. We can say that.
Yep. So if you needed a running back this year, maybe, do a little shifting around of some assets and get yourself into that 2025 group. But the other name that you mentioned, Emeka Egbuka, I do love that he is going back. I think it's a really smart move for him to do that, because I really think that and we talked about this on the wide receivers. It was like he's pushed all the way down to like 7 at this point in our rankings. He's an extremely talented wide receiver. It was by no fault of his own, really, that this happens. He just so happens to, we have a lot of talented guys, perhaps higher ceiling guys that push their way ahead of him in this class, especially when you're not seeing the player at his full ability this year with the injuries and all of that going on with Ohio State. So I love that he's going back, and I love that we're going to get to talk about him again next year. And I fully expect he's going to come in as easily one of the top wide receivers in the class, and I don't expect it to change much. So I did love that decision, even though I will miss, the year without Emeka in the NFL.
Yeah, me too. I liked it a lot for Egbuka. I mean, a disappointing season kind of all around when you take in all the factors for him. So, and then the Travion after the Judkins news, because that came first, that he was transferring to Ohio State.
Yep.
It was like, okay, this is because Travion is going to be declaring. And then Travion says he's coming back, and I'm like, oh, all right, this is not what I expected. But, I mean, it'll be a fun team next year. I think a lot of it has to do with the Michigan-Ohio State thing, too. I mean, I think these guys that go to Ohio State just really want to beat Michigan. And I think that plays a part in it. So all that being said, we got IDPs to chat about.
Well, the segue here is that a couple edge rushers from Ohio State also decided to go back
You're right.
to school. So a few less names in the D-line spots maybe, but spoiler, it's still
okay.
a pretty good group.
Yeah, it's okay.
So, yeah, it's all right. So we're going to talk about D-line, linebacker, and DB. Disclaimer before we start the discussion in the spirit of full transparency. At this point in the process, we don't have access to all 22 for IDP like we do for all of the skill groups. I mean, for the last 4 weeks, these film grinds, it's all 22. It's 4 games a piece. Like for this, we're working with what we got. And a lot of that is, here's one tape maybe on YouTube, and then I'm going to try to find like a condensed game or like a Michigan defense versus so-and-so type of deal. So it's not a perfect science at this point in time, but that is also okay because we know that IDP is a position group as a whole that is very much affected post NFL draft. These guys and post combine too, in a lot of cases. There's a very long road yet ahead for these IDP players. But I think from guys that we talked about during the year, watching the games, and then at this point in time, revisiting some of those players, I think I have a pretty good grasp on where we are right now. And so I'm excited to talk about these players.
Yeah. So something that if you're trying to do this and you're trying to dig through, find IDP, scout them, is just try to find all 22 of like a quarterback and find them playing against. Like if you look at Jaden Daniels against Florida State, like you can see a good amount of Jared Verse doing that. That's my suggestion. That's kind of how I go. And then just find what you could find outside of that.
Yep, exactly. So let's kick it off. We're going to start with D-line, and our scoring settings will be posted in the description. Obviously, that comes into play here quite a bit. So the way that we operate, if you're unfamiliar with how we do things with IDP, D-line stars are prioritized. And so typically in these classes, it ends up with tier 1 edge players are the cream of the crop when you think about the holistic IDP class. We will sum that up at the end of this thing, Collin, with a top 5 overall IDPs. But starting just with D-line, doing a top 3, give me your number 3 D lineman in this class.
My number 3 D lineman is not an edge player. I'll start with that.
Okay.
I got Jer'Zhan Newton as my number 3 D lineman.
I love it.
And it was close because, like you said, the edge class is good this year. Like we have a solid IDP class in general. Yeah. We've kind of been last year it wasn't great. We had Will, we had there was a couple names, but I feel like this year we have a pretty solid crop of guys, and leaving some people out is because Jer'Zhan Newton is a dog. Like he inside IDL 7.5 sacks this year. He is a mauler on the inside. He moves people. And so this is the big discussion is like, where do you draft IDL? Do you draft IDL? What do you think about it? I'm all in on IDL pass rushers because I think that is a position that is of value in the NFL right now. I think it's rising in value, and I think Jer'Zhan Newton can completely change the inside of a defense with the way he plays. This is a 6'2", 300-pound player. He's a junior out of Illinois, and I mean he has a few pass rush moves that he can go to where he will, just decimate guards and centers. Like these guys stand no chance against him. So I'm curious what you think about Jer'Zhan. From your reaction, I'm guessing you don't have him top 3, but that's okay.
No, I don't. And that is really a product of how I view the top of this edge group. I think I have 3 edge rushers that I think are very, very good players. And Jer'Zhan Newton, aka Johnny Newton, you might hear that. He's right outside of that group for me in terms of overall talent and ability at this, within this position group as a whole. He's one of my favorite players generally in the NFL draft class. I mean, this is, like you said, an absolute disruptive presence from the interior on the defensive line. And we got a little bit of a taste of this last year in a different sense with a generational sort of interior rusher. At least that's what I thought about him with Jalen Carter. And I backed up a little bit late in the process on Carter, and I kicked myself about it to this day because I feel like there is this stigma with interior rushers. Even now, when we see guys fantasy relevant at this position, and I mean, obviously the benchmark is Aaron Donald, and then everything cascades down from that. But I think by this point in time, I just have to recognize, and we collectively have to recognize, that interior rushers are real fantasy assets, especially guys that can put up double-digit sacks. And I think Johnny Newton has that sort of potential in the NFL. I really do. I know he's a little bit undersized. It doesn't show up in terms of his strength and his ability as a pass rusher. So I have limited questions about that, translating to the NFL level. But he's a dog, like you said, and he's a very fun player to watch.
Yeah, I mentioned he's got some the chop move that he has where he just boom, you're not touching me anymore, and then he's discards that interior lineman. It's him alone in the middle of the offensive line. It's what is number 4 doing here? What are we doing? And so and the undersized thing, I do it's there, and I think it helps him more than it hurts him because you see him chasing down plays a fair amount, and 2 or 3 of his sacks, I think 2.5 of them came from him running down a quarterback that's rolling out. And a bigger guy, you might not see him, punch through the interior line and then also go chase down the quarterback. And I think that has a decent amount of value. And then the other thing that I really like about him is that if you score pass deflections, he gets his hands in passing lanes a lot. And he even had a field goal block this season because of that skill. I mean, he gets up into the lanes. He knows where to be. And, I mean, he's just a disruptive player.
Yeah. We gave him a badge this year. That Wisconsin game, that's some of the best tape from any defensive player all season. He was unstoppable against the Badgers and got ejected at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Still had 6 pressures, 2 sacks, just crazy. But very fun player. So, all right. My number 3 D lineman in this class is Dallas Turner. Do you have him higher?
I don't.
Really?
He got left out.
Okay. So this is another one of those where it's it's going to go one of 2 ways, because some folks, it's Dallas Turner almost feels like he's sort of claiming the edge 1 right now. At least that's the sense that I'm getting. Right. And it makes sense because when we talked about Dallas Turner in the summer, a lot of it was, I need to see this. You could see the promise, you could see the potential, you could see the athlete and a player that loved to go to strength moves. He loved the bull rush. He loved the long arm. We needed to see a more complete rusher out of him. And especially a player that's this level of an athlete, if you can add a little bit of technique to go with your athleticism, you got the recipe to be a real star. And I think that is, in a lot of cases, what we saw from Dallas Turner this year. I mean, even just simply looking at production numbers, up to 11 sacks this year, career high, 55 total pressures. That was like 18 more than last year. I mean, he was more disruptive. He was more of a playmaker at that position. You see him making big plays against the run even. I mean, very good season, all things considered. And it elevated Turner for me to a pretty high defensive, a pretty high edge grade in terms of the NFL. Why he comes in at number 3 for me is that I still don't see as much refinement from the technical side that I was hoping for. And there are 2 players ahead of him right now that, yes, they're both older players, but they show you a lot more right now that says, I know how to win at the NFL level from day one. Turner, I don't feel that way about. That's not to say that he can't get there. And that's not even to say that he can't become the best edge player in this class. But there's a little bit more projection here. And when you have guys as talented as the 2 ahead of him, in my opinion, I put him here at number 3 for right now.
Yeah, I have him at number 4. So like he's just outside. And the reason that I got him at 4 is because I feel like my other 3 guys could plug and play in any NFL defense day one and make a huge difference. And the thing about Dallas Turner is he absolutely could do that. But I just have a couple more questions with him.
Yeah.
Like I feel like he has made that improvement, like you talked about, from last year to this year, where it's less, let me be an athlete, go get the quarterback. And there is some more nuance and there's some more technique there. Something that I noticed this year is it's really easy when you're as athletic as Turner to bend the edge over and over again and use that power move and like take the outside of the tackle and try to beat him with, you're just out athlete that tackle. What I saw a lot from Turner, a few more times at least with Turner this year, is him setting up that outside move and then getting to the inside of that tackle. And that helped a lot in his pass defense and then also in his run defense. You see a few times where he, gives him that outside look and then shoots in and then has that inside track on the running back. And I feel like that's something that helped him a ton. So this is a player with a lot of potential, athletically gifted, and I could see a track where he becomes a superstar, but he also, he can get handled. Like I've seen it a few times where he's just getting stonewalled in games, and it's like, this happens.
And a big reason for that, at least from what I've seen, is one thing we talked about in the summer was developing counter moves. And you touched on it with, developing a little bit of that inside move to counter, the outside. That was the promising part of this year. It still needs work.
Yep.
And especially that inside move. He tries the inside move to varying degrees of effectiveness right now. But the good news is that he's trying it. He's diversifying his repertoire right now. I'd still like to see him work in a few more counters because there were way too many reps for a player of this caliber, for a player of this skill level. Way too many reps of him stalling out against tackles that it's like, if he goes to the bull rush and the tackle has leverage and that is shut down, he's just out of the play at that point. And so I think he's a very, very good edge player. I don't, and I want to preface this also, I don't think there's a Will Anderson edge player in this class. There is no like elite tier edge rush prospect, but there are 3 excellent ones in my opinion, and this is one of them.
Yep. And another thing, it's he doesn't get a ton of tackles, which I don't love. That was the other note that I had, is like he had 53 total tackles, which is not bad, but I feel like that sets your floor as a player. Like sacks are the splash plays that set your ceiling, But the tackles are when you don't get that sack in a game, when you're getting double teamed, stuff like that. If you're, the number one edge threat on a team and they're revolving a game plan around you, and if Dallas Turner is going to be, a top 15 NFL draft pick, and he's going to be that kind of guy, then you're absolutely going to get game plan around. You got to be able to get those tackles, and he was better in the run game. Just need to keep seeing him make those steps, I'd say.
Yep, 100%. Number 2 for you in this class.
Number 2 is Jared Verse. Here we are. Is he your number 1?
He is.
Okay. Do you wanna?
We can talk about him. I'm assuming I'm gonna wager that we're having a flip flop situation here, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, who knows? There's a lot of defensive players out there.
It's true. So, all right, we'll talk about him though.
Okay. So Jared Verse is, a well-rounded player. This is a good pass rusher that got better from last year to this year, despite what the box score might tell you. Last year he was, 47 tackles, 9 sacks. This year, 41 and 9. It's pretty similar. But this year he just seems like a more refined, more under control player. He's got 3 moves that seem like they work every time. He's got the bull rush, which is absurd. The things that he does to tackles probably are like finable offenses. Like, it's sickening. And then he's got the speed chop to the outside and the swim move where he'll beat you with the bull rush, and then you kind of get on your heels and then he goes by you. And that's what we're talking about with the counter moves. It's like he's got them. So Verse, he's a strong player. His get off is excellent. So there's times where it looks like he's going before the ball is snapped, but it's simultaneous. And then he finishes plays too. So I love watching Verse, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about him as your number 1 DL.
Yeah, we see him very similarly, and that goes back even to the summer when we were, in the same boat, that he was the number 1 guy. And my number 2 player gave him a run, and that's just the reason that he's still at number 1 is just because I think he is a very high floor edge player at the NFL level with plenty of upside left in his profile. For perspective, a guy like Dallas Turner is going to be 21, newly 21 when he's drafted. And Verse is going to be 23 and a half. So Dallas Turner might be a high-end NFL edge rusher by the time he is the age that Verse is now. So that's the argument for Turner. But in my opinion, Verse is just the way that he converts speed to power is so spectacular. His strength on that bull rush, when it's 1 step, 2 step, my hands are on you. Half these tackles have no idea what to do. And they can't do anything. There is no I'm going to throw my hands, I'm going to try to set my base. No, they can't set the base because they're literally already in the air. That is the level of speed to power that he is generating. And, is that going to be a common case in the NFL? Is he going to ragdoll NFL left tackles consistently? No, but he absolutely has the strength to play day 1 against NFL level tackles, unquestionably. And he also has a little bit of a bag as a pass rusher already. This is not a raw power athlete player. This is a real pass rusher already, and one that has shown for 2 years that he can do it at an elite level in college football.
Who's the guy from last year that went number 9 to the Raiders?
Tyree Wilson went number 7.
This is not Tyree Wilson.
and that's the next point I was actually going to bring up is like, he could have just came out last year. Like,
true.
He could. I'm talking about he's going to be 23 and a half and whatever. He's an old man already. Like, if he's 22 years old, he's already a good NFL player at this point. I mean, Tyree Wilson, we know about Tyree Wilson. Like, we were both a little skeptical, still like the ceiling long term. Like, we're not going to make judgments after 1 year, but Jared Verse is a better NFL player at this point in time, if he's in the league, than Tyree Wilson is right now. So it's a little confusing as to why he would come back in the first place, but I'm not going to let that like deter me. I 2 years now of this, and there was a little bit of question earlier this year where it was like, where did Jared Verse go? Like, what, the numbers aren't here. And then you start to worry, like, what's going on here. The way that he finished this season left nothing in question anymore. I mean, PFF credits him with back-to-back 3-sack games to end the year. He was a game wrecker against Louisville with the season on the line. I mean, he gets up for big moments, and I feel very confident that he will be at least a good NFL edge rusher with potential to be elite.
Yeah, I think that he is absolutely, going to be a good player. I think that he has the skill and the motor and the athleticism to put up numbers one way or the other. I think it's funny how much like the final stat line impacts how people feel about players. Because like all year we're like, yeah, no, we're on the Jared Verse train. I made the joke at one point. I was like, oh, where's Jared Verse? We're not going to, we'll see. But at the end of the day, it's like, you can tell he's out here making an impact. And then at the end of the year, it's like, oh, well, he had like the same year as last year. That's pretty good, but.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, a lot of that production came at the end of the year. Well, what was he doing the rest of the way? I mean, and he ends the year with a 21.5% win rate as a pass rusher. That was third in all of college football. He was a disruptive rusher for most of this season. The production started to come towards the end, tied it up with a nice little bow. We don't have to talk about it. Oh, can he finish sacks? Like, that narrative is gone. He put up a great year and great player. Yep. Still love him. Number 2 for me.
Number 2?
We're going to find out if this is your number 1. Laiatu Latu.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I feel better now.
And this is such an interesting group of players. Like Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, Laiatu Latu. Very different players across the board with different profiles, different athletic traits. I mean, like, and I have them all grouped fairly tightly. Like, there is no like tier separation for me. I have all 3 of these players on one tier. This is my tier 1 of the edge group. And Latu is the technician of this group. I mean, there will be questions potentially that pop up like post combine when guys like Verse and especially Turner like test out of this world. And suddenly it'll be like, yep, run away. These are the guys. But if Latu is even like in the ballpark in terms of the testing stuff, his technique as a pass rusher is shocking. Like, it's amazing to watch him go to work. The way he uses his hands as a rusher is special. I mean, it is truly special to watch. And it ends up this season with, 15 sacks, 25% pass rush win rate, which leads all of college football, 64 total pressures. I mean, it feels like every time this guy is on the field, it's like the defense is terrified of him. Like, double teams, running backs coming in to help. And half the time it doesn't matter. He's just too good and too technical at this position where I don't really care that he's not the level of an athlete as these other guys. I think he is going to translate for sure.
Yeah. So I have Latu like a decent amount
Like
higher than I have Verse, because I mean, this is an impressive player for me.
Yep.
Like, he would be my edge one NFL, edge one fantasy. Like, I think this should be who the teams are like trading up for to get early in this draft.
So let's go back to a comment that I made then.
Okay.
About Will Anderson.
Yeah.
In relation to a player like Will Anderson, how close are we?
I mean, it's not quite there. Like, Will was pretty special.
Yeah.
You know? But I think that, like, he should be going in that, you know, top five, top 8 range. Like, so like you said, he's a technician. There's the hands. He's got all kinds of pass rush moves. He's got, you know, the stab that like Reggie White basically invented and perfected. Latu uses that and ragdolls people with that. He's got the hand chuck. He's got the rip. I mean, he goes inside and out, and he's effective in both spots because of his size. He's 6'5", 265 pounds. So he can, I mean, win at both in pass rush situations and rush situations. He has active hands in the pass game too. He gets his hands up in passing lanes. He had 2 really nice interceptions that he went over his head to catch for both of them, which, I mean, not a lot of defensive linemen are doing. That's a batted ball for a lot of guys, and he's going up and plucking it out of the air. And the thing I mean, the motor is really good. He's chasing down plays. He's working through the entire play. You don't see him like give up on plays very often. But my favorite thing is the patience. I mean, the patience on the backside of plays, especially where he's setting the edge on like a cutback lane, or, you know, just waiting for something to happen. If he doesn't get that pass rush win, and then he sits, and there was one interception on a screen pass where, you know, you get that free rush and you're like, oh, I'm going. And a lot of these, you know, they got their mindset on, I'm sacking the quarterback. And you get through and it's like, wait. And then he sits back, jumps up and plucks it, and then returns it. And it's like, he just seems like he's got the IQ to go with the pass rush moves, and I think he's like gonna surprise people at the combine. Like, I see some things that are gonna translate to a nice combine day. Now, he's not Dallas Turner, Chop Robinson, Jared Verse level athletes, but I mean, those guys are like freakish athletes. So right. I don't think he needs to be.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, in no way is this like a, you know, he's not an athlete. He's a technician, you know, low ceiling. Like, no, I don't see that at all. I think he's an adequate athlete, whereas these guys are like exceptional athletes. And the other thing is the medical stuff, because it's going to come into play. Absolutely. Like, he was medically retired from the game of football. He started his college career at Washington. He had to medically retire due to a neck injury, back injury, something in that scary area.
A neck injury, yeah.
So medically retires due to a neck injury. UCLA is the one program that will clear him to play football again. And he gets cleared, comes to UCLA last year, has 12 sacks, 65 pressures, becomes one of the best edge players in college football, and then just runs it back and does that again at an even higher level this season. I mean, it's one of the best stories in this entire draft class, and I don't know how it will affect him on NFL draft day, but that is one thing that is working against him, obviously, that these other players don't have. But I'm with you, man. he was a treat to watch. The USC tape from Latu is
It's
like
silly.
If you want to just watch a pass rusher like and just have fun. Like sometimes it's like, okay, we're going to win a few reps here, we're going to play against the run here. Like watch a game where an edge rusher has their way on pretty much every single snap. Watch Latu against USC. That's what he was doing in that game.
Yep. I mean, that was one of them. I can't think of the other game that was like, oh my God. But also UCLA has some absurd jersey combinations. Like talk about look good, feel good, play good. We talked about UCLA a lot with Charbonnet last year, but also this year it's like I can't now I want to know what game it was because they were wearing some jerseys that I was like I don't even remember these existing, but these might be my favorite jerseys I've ever seen. It's like the gold top, it's light blue, just white numbers. I mean, sick jerseys, but that's going to be the thing that holds Latu back, I think, in the draft process. Like, would I select him if I was like a GM and I was doing my due diligence in the NFL? Would I trade up and take him at number 5 when I could have like Jared Verse, who has clear medicals and like 2 years of good production and, you know, whatever? You know, there's a question there. But I mean, when we're talking about, you know, talent and tape alone, these last 2 years that he's put together and this year especially had just blew me away.
Yep. I love that. So, all right. We got a good group of D linemen. Linebackers. What did you, before we get started, what did you think about this group of linebackers?
I have one that I love and 3 other ones that I like. How about you?
I have 2 that I really like. I won't say love.
Okay.
2 that I really like. And that, I don't know. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So last year, you listen to Camp Dynasty, you know that the linebacker class was a little strange. And I think this class is kind of similar in the sense that I don't think there's like a tier 1 guy here, at least in my opinion. But we'll get into that. I'll start with number 3. Edgerrin Cooper from Texas A&M. Is he on your list? He's in your number 3?
He is.
Okay. So Cooper is a player that I'm not really sold on. Like, I think he's starting to, he had a phenomenal year this year. Let's just put that out there. It was a breakout senior season for Edgerrin Cooper at Texas A&M. And that puts him on the map, where this is not a player that we were talking about before the year when we talked about linebackers in this class. Suddenly, here's a name that is like linebacker 1 in a lot of instances right now. I don't see that, but I understand why it's happening. Because I think when you look at Cooper's game, 6'3", 230, I think he just represents the best like upside pathway. When you see a player like this, and I mean, he stands out on this D. Like, it's not hard to find 45 on Texas A&M. He's a big dude playing this position. And 230, I think you put a little more mass onto this frame even. That might eliminate some of the problems that I have with Cooper, at least one of them, which is that he's not a crazy tackler. Like, he can lay it, and he can get into space, and he can be athletic in a straight line and get to the ball carrier. But I didn't see it consistently enough for a player of this size and athleticism, a player that was wrapping and finishing plays time and time again. And that is just something that is like exacerbated at a fantasy level where I'm prioritizing guys that might not be linebacker one in the NFL sometimes. Like these guys that I'm looking for might be those like late day two guys that are quote unquote low upside players, but they're just great tacklers, have great instincts. I think Cooper's more of a project player right now that had a really, really good season, something encouraging that says he can and is developing at this position, but I don't see him as that finished product and that no doubt linebacker one at this point.
Wrap up, young man.
I like how you said it better than me.
Golly. That's how I felt watching Edgerrin Cooper's tape the whole time. I'm like, all right, I love it. I love that you're, laying the hit stick, but every once in a while, man, we just got to wrap up because we're missing tackles because you're going for the highlight. And the highlights are awesome with Cooper. And, you watch the highlight tape and it's like, hey, here he is, that's LB1. And the thing that jumped out to me when I was, scrolling through and I'm like, what's going on? Who are linebackers to watch? And I'm like, oh, Cooper, 8 sacks. Hello. What's going on here? All right. I'm going to complain about how he's used with this A&M team because why the hell is he spying this much? I understand you have an athletic linebacker that's instinctual, that can chase down a quarterback, but good gravy, like we don't need to be spying this much because he's doing it a lot. Like there are multiple games where he is solely, like obviously not only QB spying, but it's a lot. And that's why he has 8 sacks because, the quarterback gets out of the pocket and he goes. And this is an athletic player. And he is chasing down, closing, and wrapping up these quarterbacks. And so I don't love that kind of usage because it either tells me that your coaches don't trust your coverage instincts, or they, see you as like a shoot out of a cannon kind of player, which I think we both feel like he is.
Yes.
Like he's go get him. And maybe that's what he is. And that's why he lands at my linebacker 3 spot, because it feels like he's almost like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah feels like a fair kind of player to liken him to. Because like, is JOK a good player? Yes, he is. But there are some flaws there because he sees something and the trigger is pulled and there's no unpulling that trigger. And that's kind of how it feels with Cooper.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's a big thing that holds me back, where I can completely understand in this sort of a linebacker class where you would prioritize a very traitsy player that showed you something this year that, has an 8 sack year. Like I get it, but I agree with a lot of the things you're saying. And it's what prevents him from rising ahead of the 2 guys that I have above him. I think coverage is still a question mark for me. He had a 59.7 coverage grade according to PFF last season, and he elevated that to an 85.5 this year. And I didn't see a player that was necessarily like a slam dunk in coverage right now. So I don't know how the grade, like we know at this point about PFF grades, take them with a very large, take them with a whole salt shaker, honestly. But they apparently believe that he made significant strides in coverage this year. And I will trust that he did. I didn't watch like his 2022 film in preparation. I'll trust that he got better at it. I'm just saying, I don't think he's an 85 graded coverage linebacker right now. I don't think he's like a stud in coverage right now. I think he's a little bit more raw in a lot of areas of his game. than honestly a player at this experience level should be. I mean, he's a senior. He's going to be 22 years old when he's drafted. I don't like how traitsy he feels right now at this point. But again, here's my dynasty brain saying 22 years old, put him in the grave. Like there's development here. There's a path where he becomes something. But right now, the two players I have ahead of him, I feel a lot more comfortable about them in an IDP format than Cooper.
Yeah, I'm doing some math here because I don't understand how this comes out to an 85.5 when he only graded over 85 once all season in coverage. So I'm just averaging this out real quick to see how the hell they get to an 85 coverage grade for the season when the guy seems like he averages about 70 all year. I mean,
I don't get it. That's why I don't talk about it.
This seems fraudulent to me.
We use PFF because it's nice to have stats to pull from, like pass rush win rate and stops and all of these numbers. The grades, I don't know about them. And we're getting a 67 average.
That's the average. How did we get to 85 PFF? I just did 67.1 is what he actually graded on the season, which feels more accurate.
Yeah, exactly. so yeah, whatever,
all right.
man.
Anyway.
Okay. PFF grades
PFF.
aside. So number 3 players out of the way. I'll let you take it away for number 2.
Number 2 is Payton Wilson out of NC State.
Same.
All right. I think we're going to be lockstep here, top 3.
We are.
All right. Payton Wilson is a tackle machine. That is where he becomes my number 2 and threatened to become my number 1 for a little while. So he had 138 total tackles. That's 69 solo, 69 assisted. Very nice. He had 6 sacks. He's just a playmaker all over the field. He has a nose for the football. He's instinctual. And the kid just, once he gets his hands on you, it's over. The play's done. That is what is beautiful about a player like this. He has the size. He has the instinct, the speed. He's not a generational athlete. I'll say that. He's, does good enough. And he's a playmaker. That's all there really is to it. And I think that he's just going to be a tackle guy in the NFL for a while.
And I honestly think he can be more than that too. I think he's a playmaker is what he is. He has that playmaker quality about him. And he is this is a Feldman's freak guy. This is an athlete playing this position. And it shows up. He's listed 238. Does he look 238 to you?
He doesn't look 238 to me.
He looks smaller.
Yeah.
So
he also doesn't look 6'4" to me.
Right. So, we'll find out measurements, what it really looks like with this player. He does look a little smaller, probably around that 230 range, which
is fine these days.
Cooper's 230. Another player we're probably going to talk about soon is 230. These are not, it's not the same thing anymore. So he's got traits. He puts it on film, an ability to just be a heat-seeking missile to the ball. Wherever the ball is, look for 11 because the chances are he's going to be right there. And that's the kind of player that I just love from an IDP perspective. This could be LB3, LB4, LB5. There's medical question marks with him as well. So who knows what the NFL does with him? He's just a player that I want on my fantasy football team as an IDP player. He is that sort of player where I want him because when he hits, he will be that sort of difference-making linebacker. I go back to a player, and I believe I've said this before. He's 15 pounds lighter, but he has the same last name. It's Logan Wilson. Logan Wilson's 245. He's a big guy in the middle. Great instincts in coverage. I don't think Payton Wilson is as elite as Logan Wilson was in coverage at this point in time, but I think he's very good in coverage. Very good. And he had 3 interceptions this year. That goes along with this instinctual and fast linebacker play that he has as a tackler, and a player that can blitz as well with the level of athlete that he is. I mean, they sent him off the edge a decent amount. I mean, he was doing like rip moves and stuff off the edge for them. I mean, I don't think they're going to be playing him off the edge in the NFL, but A-gap blitzing with a player like this, I mean, he's a chess piece. He's a dynamic playmaker from the middle of the defense. And like I said, just a guy that I want on my fantasy team.
Yep, me too. I mean, I say he's a tackle guy, not as a knock on the player.
No. Yep.
But because I think he could be like 100+ tackle player in the NFL. And like, I think he'll be leading his team in tackles. And then also, like, that sets your floor. And I think that's all you can really ask for when you're drafting IDP guys is, like, where is he going to be on a game-to-game basis? Because you don't want to – when you're looking at, that linebacker spot, you don't want to be plugging in a boom-bust player, in my opinion. I mean, you want the guy that's going to get you that 10, 15 points. And, then if they get the sack or they get the pick, whatever, it's gravy. It's all bonus. You don't want the guy that's like, 4 tackles, you get 6 points one week, and then you get the 19 the next week. Like that's not what I'm looking for out of a linebacker. That's what I want my DL position for. And I think Payton Wilson gives you that high floor of, ranging around that 8 to 10 tackle range every game, which is what he did in his last college season. He also grades at a 90.4 coverage grade from PFF. What's the real grade? 69. That's what he actually averaged at. So PFF propaganda, whatever. That aside, he was solid in coverage. So I don't know about the Logan Wilson comp, but that's because I haven't watched a ton of Logan Wilson.
It's not and this is the dangerous game that we play. It's not a comp. I don't want anybody to think I'm making a comp. There's parallels from a player that when I was watching Logan Wilson, he was the kind of guy that I said, I want him on my fantasy team. Right. I want him. The coverage instincts, the range as a tackler. I just want this guy on my team. He's a 3rd-round pick. He's like linebacker 3 or 4 that year. And it's like he becomes one of the players from that class. Sometimes it's just that simple. Find guys that are playmakers at this position.
Last year is a good example of a guy that we banged the table for. He's undersized, whatever. And he just is a good player. Got a ton of tackles, could do everything. And then he sees the field as a rookie and gets stuff done. And it ends up being a starting middle linebacker. No matter the circumstances, whatever happened, doesn't matter. He makes plays. And I feel like Payton Wilson, similar. I mean, I think he's not undersized. So I don't think that's going to happen to him where he's going to go undrafted, whatever. But absolutely is going to be a game changer, a playmaker in the NFL.
Yep. And a lot of what we just talked about with Wilson, I think can apply to our number 1 player. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. sticks at number 1 for me and for you at linebacker. This is a player that I feel like really kind of embodies the conversation that we just had, where is he going to be the best tester? No. Is he the biggest is he the most prototypical linebacker size player? No. What he is instinctual, rangy, great in coverage, and shows you that ability to take matters into his own hands and make plays that can single-handedly change games. I go back to that Notre Dame game when we gave him a badge here. Watching back that film, this is a player that just takes over the game from the middle of the defense. And so I know that the, NFL draft community hasn't really like fallen for this player because he's undersized, because he has some strength limitations that are absolutely real. I just see a good linebacker. And I think in a class like this, that is a priority. And for fantasy, it absolutely is my number one priority. This is, and that's not to discredit Payton Wilson either, because to go back to what you said earlier, Payton Wilson and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. are very close for me. Like they are very close, but Trotter is just a player that I think he gets the edge because of his instincts. I think he is just, Payton is a little bit more of that, I am an athlete. I'm going to get downhill or side to side like a heat seeking missile. Trotter is way more calculated than that. And I think sometimes that works in his favor.
Okay. So we talk about being undersized as a linebacker. So here we go. Fred Warner. How much do you think Fred Warner weighs?
235?
230. Quincy Williams, all pro this year. How much do you think he weighs?
235?
225. Zaire Franklin, tackle machine, most tackles in the NFL. How much does he weigh?
230.
235.
Damn it.
We're sitting right in the range. Roquan Smith, maybe the best linebacker in football with Fred Warner. How much does he weigh? 236. So we talk about being undersized, but this is just the NFL now.
And that's what I don't understand about these conversations, because that list that you just rattled off, I mean, this is not new stuff.
Right.
Nick Bolton, 230.
Yep.
I mean, like, this has been going on for years. So I'm not sure why we all haven't said to ourselves, okay, a guy's 230, big whoop,
Foya Luakan, NFL leader in tackles, 230. Like, the guy doesn't miss a snap. Neither does Zaire, neither does Fred Warner. Like, these guys are not undersized anymore. This is just what linebackers are in the NFL. So let's get over it. Let's stop talking about these guys being undersized. 230 is the new 240. All right? We need to be able to cover. We need to be able to move. Tight ends are athletic as fuck nowadays. All right? We got to be able to cover them. So linebackers got to get smaller. We're not DB hybrids anymore. 230 is fine. We're done. I'm done talking about it. It's not undersized. If you're 220, we can start talking about it. But as long as we're in the 230 range, totally fine by me. And Jeremiah Trotter, like you said, is the epitome of a player that is just good at football. Yep. And that's what I need out of my linebacker. Like, I need you to make tackles, and I need you to cover. I think he's the best cover linebacker in this class. I think he's so fluid as a player. That mid-zone, he's holding down, man. Like, he's reading that quarterback's eyes. He had a pick against Spencer Rattler this year where he's just like, sign, seal, deliver it. Like, hand me the ball. You might as well. Like, he runs that slant, and the DB comes down into the flat zone. So Rattler's like, that's my hot read. And Trotter's like, it's already done. I'll meet you in the end zone, Spencer. So this is a guy with instincts. This is a guy with cover skills. I mean, he is a sound tackler. Like, it's not quite where Payton Wilson is, but it's also not Edgerrin Cooper where you're going for like the big play. Like, he is a good tackler. And I love how he takes angles, how he gets underneath blockers. Like, this, I feel like, is one of the next great linebackers in the NFL. This is the one player where I was like, I love this guy. If you want to take him at the bottom of the first round, I don't blame you at all. So, I mean, I was super impressed with how Trotter plays at 12 tackles for loss. That is, I mean, this is the kind of player you want to slot in that you can use high draft capital on in your dynasty drafts, in the NFL drafts. I mean, if your team gets this guy in the NFL draft, I'll be jealous. So I mean, just love this guy as a player.
Yeah, I mean, the IQ shows up so much. I mean, so much. And it's kind of hard to say that a lot. Like, it's hard when you're just watching the game unfold, and it's like, how can you tell like what a guy's thinking? But with a guy like Trotter, I feel like you just see it because he's so calculated and he's so intentional about everything that he's doing. And one thing that shows up for me is there is a strength weakness here. I mean, he is not the strongest guy, and when blockers engage him, he does struggle to shed blocks, and he can get moved out of plays when that happens. But one thing that I noticed that he does, and I don't see this a lot from linebackers, is when he is blitzing or coming downhill and he sees that there's a blocker in front of him, he'll almost do like a little like crossover move. Like it's like a crafty way of avoiding the block. Like I see this when running backs stay in and he's blitzing the A gap and he comes in and the running back's waiting for him. He won't take that running back on. Like some guys want to put themselves into the running back, push him backwards, get into the quarterback. Trotter does a little bit of like a 1-2 shimmy, and then he's so agile in that short area that he just gets around those guys. And the running back is like putting his head down, getting the hands out, getting ready. Trotter's already past him because he's not taking on that block. So he finds ways to mitigate his weaknesses, and he's able to do it because he is a good athlete. I think that's a misconception about him, is that he's not rangy. He's not, this explosive athlete. Like, he's not Payton Wilson. Like you said, he's not going to get downhill at that speed or get side to side at that speed, but he is a agile player and he can make plays with his athleticism. So I love that he finds ways to get around his own weaknesses in his game. And so there's very little that I sit and say, this is going to hold you back, especially considering the list of names that you rattled off at the top, where it's like, these guys do not need to be, block shedders, all the time. There is a very diverse skill set that it takes to play this position at the NFL level. And that's why it's so hard to find guys. That's why it's so hard to scout these players and to find translatable traits, because it's not always what you think it's going to be. And I think Trotter is a player that embodies that.
So Jeremiah Trotter Sr.
Yes.
is his father, who played for notably the Eagles. He also played for Washington and Tampa Bay, but he was 6'1", 262. Talk about an era. He was drafted in 1998. So, that's crazy. That's
different time, man.
I know. Long
Wild.
Time ago.
Yeah.
Ages,
very, very long time.
Ages ago.
Yeah.
No, man, Trotter, I also wrote down what you mentioned about like not taking on blockers, because like, you can be 230, but you got to know you're 230 also. And the best way to do that is not to engage directly with like a 290-pound guard that's like coming to the second level. And it's almost like a running back setting up a defensive player.
Yes, I had the exact same thought.
Where he's like, I'm gonna take this left angle, so then the running back goes right, and then you kind of shoot that. And I totally see that all the time with him, where he's like setting up the player as if he's making the play rather than him reacting and then like catching. And that's what I think takes him from like a guy that is going to be a tackle machine to a guy that's going to be a playmaker, Yep.
100%. So, all right. That is linebackers. And don't worry, we will do honorable mentions at the very end collectively, guys, because I there's a linebacker that I do want to talk about yet, but we'll talk about that at the end. DBs, we're not going to do a top 3 because we know it, or if you've played full IDP long enough, you understand the DB is an interesting group of players, and it really takes being an elite DB to make a mark as a fantasy asset. I don't see an elite DB in this class. I'm assuming you do not either.
No, I have 2 names that I have written down, but it's the guy that you like kind of put the star on Sleeper and just kind of keep tabs on how many snaps they're playing.
Yep. And it's like, it reminds me of last year where we had players like interesting names, DB spots like Jordan Battle, Sidney Brown, Ryan Branch. I mean, 2 of them ended up playing slot corner for most of their rookie seasons. And Jordan Battle came on towards the end. He looks like maybe a real deal sort of a player, but it's not Derwin James. It's not Kyle Hamilton. It's not, like we don't have that player in this class. So could there be a star from this group? Maybe, but it's not a player that you're going to go out and say, I need to take this guy in the early 3rd or, whatever. That being said, my favorite safety from this group is the same safety that I called out in the summer, which is Tyler Nubin, who had an even better year this year. And I think really made his mark in this safety group where he is more of a deep safety. At least that's what he played a decent amount for Minnesota this year. But he is a guy that gets into the box, which is unlike some of the other better free safeties in this class. Nubin is a guy that can play both roles. And so I think it will depend on what an NFL team is drafting him to be. I think his skill set suggests that you want him to be that sort of free safety player, but there is fantasy upside with Nubin that I think makes him the DB1 of this group.
Yeah, I think that it's pretty clear that Nubin is the best of the bunch, and that's why I say just kind of keep an eye on what where they're actually playing once it comes to their NFL role, because I mean, if Nubin ends up being a free safety, that's probably best for him, but he has the skill set to play in the box. So if he's playing significant snaps in the box, that's when, you can maybe take a chance and I'll throw him on, maybe throw him on your taxi squad if you have one, like that kind of thing, where he's a good player and he'll play for an NFL team. It just depends what role he ends up playing and, if he's getting those tackles, because as much as you like a playmaker and you want a guy that's, getting picks and stuff like that, it's not sticky. That's not something you can rely on game in and game out. People have made the gamble of trading for Trayvon Diggs a couple years ago, and he has the one season where it's oh my God, he has 10 interceptions, and then the next year he's not worth anything. And same with probably Deron Bland. He has the season that he has this year with all 6 pick sixes. It's not sticky. It's not going to happen. So you can't rely on these coverage guys, and it seems like Nubin's best suited to do that. I mean, he can get his nose in there, he can get dirty, he can get tackles, but it just
has size also to do that.
Right.
6'2", 210. So This is one of the bigger safeties in the group, which only adds to that case, but I completely agree with you.
Yep. And then I have Cameron Kitchens from Miami, who is another coverage guy, another guy that plays most of the snaps in the free safety position. He gets in the box, not a ton. Gets in the slot, not a ton. But, when you talk about being closer to the line of scrimmage, it's about he spends half the time in the box than he does to a free safety role. He has 200 box snaps versus almost 400 free safety snaps. So that's another player that is a pretty good, pretty instinctual player that got a fair amount of tackles, but is likely going to end up in a free safety role.
Yep. Those are 2 names. Absolutely keep your eye on them. Figure out what their role is. And I mean, this is where this all comes into play because it's January, right? Like,
yes,
this will adapt very much over time post NFL draft, specifically with this position group, DBs. The one box guy that I want to call out is Jaden Hicks from Washington State. I think he's the best pure box safety in this class. I didn't necessarily love Hicks's film, but he is a guy that's getting a fair amount of buzz right now, it seems like, and he is a Senior Bowl guy, just recently accepted his invite to the Senior Bowl. So we'll get an opportunity to see Hicks in Mobile in a couple weeks, but he is the guy that you look at snap counts, 456 snaps in the box compared to 200 as the free safety. So he's a bigger player, 6'3", 210, loves to try to throw that weight around. And that is one of his flaws, is that he loves to try to get that hit stick moment, put himself on Sports Center. Clean that up a little bit. But yeah, he's a player that I think can develop and maybe be a more consistent tackling option in this position group.
Last guy I want to mention is James Williams, who is also from Miami. I'm sorry,
big guy.
I can't like, you watch Miami and it's like, okay, yeah, I see it. You know, there's a vision here. Is he like polished player? Absolutely not. Does he miss a lot of tackles? He does. But he plays in the box. He's 6'5", 215, and he hits like a truck when he hits you. So he also is really hard to throw over when he's in the middle of the field. I mean, you see a lot of tip passes. I mean, he got 65 tackles this year. Like, he's an interesting, like, very low floor, but has a decent ceiling. So if you want to watch list another guy, I'd say James Williams. I don't think he's officially declared. I don't think he's declared yet. He's a junior, so may not even come out. But it's just a guy that I am very interested in.
And today is the deadline for declarations. So this week we will know for certain who's in and who is out. So, all right. That is D-line, linebackers, and DBs.
He officially declared for the NFL draft.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just bad at Googling things.
Okay. That is 3 position groups in one. A little bit of a bonus at the end of Rankings 2.0. That is a lot of names, and we are very early in this process. Like I said, Senior Bowl coming up. A few guys that we talked about today, we will get to see there in 2 weeks. Are there any other players across any of these 3 position groups, Collin, that you would like to shout out before we get out of here?
Oh boy, are there. I mean, so Chop Robinson, we've mentioned in passing, is an edge rusher out of Penn State. He is oozing athleticism, but he's a pretty raw player. I think we can both agree there. Braylon Trice is another edge player that I think we both like through the season. And then Cedric Gray is a linebacker that is a Camp Dynasty legend, I might say.
I love that we have
him and Ben Urosic.
Yeah, Ben Urosic transferring to a college football title contender next year, like for his year 3 at Camp Dynasty. We made it, but
yeah, for year 7 for Urosic or something like that.
Yeah, but obviously Chop Robinson is one of the big omissions that is probably a first rounder in the NFL, but I agree. I think I'm nervous about him, especially playing the game that we play. Very high variance potential player, not something that I love investing in. So I'm kind of on the opposite end of Robinson right now. Braylon Trice is a player that I do like a lot, and it has to do a lot with his motor because I love high motor defensive line players. The ceiling is very questionable with a player, especially with his build. He's, plus 270 sort of a player. I think he's a good NFL player. I just don't know if he's a good or great fantasy asset at the D-line spot, but he's a name that I'm definitely keeping tabs on. At the linebacker position, a guy that I want to shout out is Junior Colson from Michigan. He is officially in the draft now, and he is a little bit more of that 245 style linebacker. Like, he's not quite as rangy as some of these, 230 guys, but he really kind of is that, I'm going to fill a gap. And when I get my hands on you, you're moving backwards. You're not moving forward anymore. And I like that. Wasn't as consistent as I had hoped. Like, I saw a few flashes on his film where I was like, oh my God, this might be like the guy. It comes and goes, and he does get pushed around and outmatched more often than you'd like to see for a player that is a bigger linebacker, 245. You'd like to see him play with a little more of that upper body strength. The lower body strength definitely shows up in those tackles, but the block shedding is still a question mark for him. So it's a name to keep an eye on, see where he goes in the NFL draft, and we'll see what that means for him. But that was my my honorable mention for the linebackers.
Also, IDL people stand up. Chris Jenkins is a very good player. But Michigan defense, man, I don't know if he's going to be fantasy relevant because he's more of a phenomenal run defender than he is like a pass rusher, i.e. like Derek Brownish, but still love him.
Good to pick up, like sometimes you need a spot start.
Right.
Pick up Derek Brown a few times, get 8 tackles on my D-line spot.
Hell yeah.
All right. That is the 2024 Dynasty Rookie IDP class as it sits today in the middle of January. And like I said, we will continue to monitor these players. It becomes very important with these defensive players through this draft process, which is officially beginning very, very soon, Collin. We are done with Rankings 2.0. The Senior Bowl is in 2 weeks from right now. That is unbelievable to me, but That's it's crazy. Happening. So what are we doing next week? We are going to take this body of work from the last 5 weeks, coming from the end of the college football season to right now. Many, many hours of film have been grinded. Many more are yet to be grinded. I still somehow have 20 wide receivers I want to watch yet. So
was the film ground?
It ground film. Yeah, we ground the film.
We ground it.
I am an English major.
So you say.
That's what I tell people.
Yeah, I'm a communications major, so we're working it out.
Right, we're figuring it out as we go. But what does that all mean? Next week, it's a big board update. We did a mock draft like a month and a half ago. A lot has changed since that draft. That's all I'm saying. So we're going to come back.
A lot of tape between now and then.
Amen. And we're going to come back and put it all together into one top 12 at this point in time. So look out for that. And if you'd like to share your thoughts on our IDP rankings or share your own rankings for this class, be sure to find us on X at camp_dynasty and TikTok at camp.dynasty. And also check out our YouTube channel where video feeds of the pods go up every single week. And of course, if you enjoyed this week's episode, be sure to like, rate, follow, review, subscribe, share, and all of those things to the pod feed. We very much appreciate that.
Hell yeah. Go subscribe, man. We've been getting a lot more subscribers on the YouTube specifically, and that's just love to see it. Thank you.
Yeah, we do it for the love of the game, but this is a community after all. It's Camp Dynasty. All the counselors we can get. There's a lot of players here, so we need all the help we can get. Come on board. We're happy to have you. So
even if Romo Dunze is your number 10 wide receiver.
Yeah, well, then we might need to talk, but all right. Thanks for stopping by Camp Dynasty, and we'll see you next week.